Welcome to Data Security Over Coffee. That's DSOC to those in the know.
Where the only thing more dangerous than a zero-day exploit is Chad from accounting clicking on every single email attachment.
From password post-its hidden under keyboards
to that one guy who keeps using password 123 despite our 47 security memos. We're here to talk about the threats you never knew you should be terrified of.
I'm Dr. Joe Harford.
And I'm Angie. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Singer Keating.
Bringing you the latest in cybersecurity nightmares and risk management drama.
Because somewhere out there, a hacker's trying to get into your company's data.
And Karen from HR just clicked on another free iPhone pop-up. This is Data Security Over Coffee, DSOC, where every episode is a penetration test you didn't ask for.
And wow, there we are. Look at that. Oh my goodness. So we are very fortunate today to have not only a super smart human on, but one of the nicest people that Angie and I have ever had the good fortune of getting to know, work with, learn from, and watch his business grow and take off. Our friend, Dr. James Norrie. James, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Nice to see you, Angie. Delighted to be back with the two of you. Always lots of fun.
So, in the spirit of, communication and letting people know who the heck we are, tell us a little bit about you and your experiences. And I think you have something really special to share. And then we can get kicked off from there.
Super. Well, I am proudly a full tenured professor at York College of Pennsylvania, and I teach mostly cybersecurity law, business law, strategy. Really an interesting time to have been educated both as a lawyer and a computer engineer and a business person. That intersection has always been a big part of what's going on in cybersecurity, as we all know. And so as I have been teaching this next generation of students, the jolt of pre-ChatGPT and after November the 30th, 2022, really had an interesting, I guess, a sort of a pivotal moment when I realized that at that point, what we had been esoterically thinking of as a far remote possibility became the first public LLM. And it occurred to me almost immediately, Joe, that I think the intersectionality of cybersecurity and AI was going to be rapid and absolutely undeniable. And so I shifted much of my focus in my consulting practice at CyberconIQ, a company that I own here in local company here in Pennsylvania, one of the ways we got to know one another. And I shifted the focus of both the company and all of my research and much of my writing to this idea that AI had both promise and peril. And what were we going to need to do as a profession to fix this? And of course, as I predicted in an op-ed way back then, shortly in early 2023, the defenders, as we know by March, had already gotten illegal copies of the code and started to replicate their own databases. And so we had the AI-enabled threat landscape already present 4 months after that release. And I know companies that are still thinking about trying to ban AI as a destination, and all I can think of is your sitting ducks. So a great time to be on a podcast talking about some of the work I do, including my new book, which is right here, called Beyond the Code, Kendall Hunt. And it's just been a ton of fun dealing with all of the connections that I get, including with folks like this, and the ability to chat with smart folks that I think can make a difference and get this message out, that in the AI-enabled world of cyber, our world is very different.
For sure. Well, when we met, we had talked about the idea that we really had to change the way in which we assessed individuals' risk tolerance.
Yep.
And, people were tired and I think bored of the standard security awareness training that everybody was just going to shell out, and everybody listened to the same video, everybody watched the same video, everybody took the same test. Yep. And yet there was this, I think this realization that you had shared with Angie and I about having different profiles, different personalities, and how that relates to risk. And so I'm wondering, how has that, and that conversation, I believe, began in the latter part of 23. So it's been about 3 years or so since we've known each other, and how I'm wondering how that's morphed itself to where we are today.
It's been longer than that. It was pre-pandemic.
It was pre-pandemic. I'm just going to say, Joe, yeah, you're behind by 2 years. It was actually the end of the
Yeah.
So, so there you go. And then we slid into the pandemic, which, as Angie just pointed out, was a fun period for all of us. It actually stalled much of the business, the dealings generally of businesses. I found everybody pulled up their horn, pulled in their horns, and away we went. That said, so really what's interesting, Joe, is that 2023 period was defining, because coming out of COVID, you are entirely right. And I have never particularly thought that security awareness training, the way we did it mostly in our industry, was anything more than a check in the box. And so that check in the box said, I put people through either annual or semi-annual training. Some people move to just-in-time models or, micro training. I mean, there's a million variations, but none of it changes the core problem. And I think the core problem that we as a profession face, and it's only gotten worse, especially in the landscape of the AI threat-enabled or AI-enabled threat landscape, it is entirely clear to me at the moment when we count on our employees to make a safe decision, that it is unlikely that most of the training they've been through is actually going to be influential at that point of decision making. And so how do you model and shape human behavior? And one of my other degrees is in psychology, educational psychology. And the thing that I know about human behavior is it's based really on instincts and impulses. And I think one of the things that I find so intriguing is, why would it be any different when somebody's online? They're going to respond to the same kinds of clues and cues that their personality maybe makes them vulnerable to. And so we know how the bad guys explore. In fact, I was just watching early morning TV on coffee, thinking about coming on your podcast. And there was yet another scam about, oh, it's the sheriff, and oh, it's this, and oh, it's that. These are ages old tricks. And the fraudsters have always been really good at manipulating our personalities. So one of the things that's really neat for me is that when the chatbot arrived, I noticed it had a tendency to tell me what it thought I wanted to hear. And this idea that it's a sycophant, right? Sycophancy is a really important part of the business model of the vendors of AI systems, like social engineering and social media. They want you to be intrigued by what's in front of you and remain on their platform. Their goal is engagement and length of time that you spend on the platform and that you remain there. So if that's what you want, well, then you probably program your AI to forgive this as a little bit of naughty language. Am I allowed to say a little naughty word, Angie?
Oh, you can say every naughty word. This is a safe space here, Dr. James.
Well, thank you, Angie. I will say then, most chatbots are programmed to kiss your ass. And so the problem with that is that may engage you, but for most people, it actually doesn't create trust. They know they're being manipulated. And the good news is we have seen the beginnings of people becoming very aware that the business model of AI is not necessarily to deliver quality information, but to deliver it in a way that has you continuing down the rabbit hole. So it's the same thing we've seen other places. So what we did is we developed the same MyQ tool that you guys have been through. And for our listeners today, MyQ is a really simple tool, kind of a lot of fun. Who doesn't want to know more about themselves? Think of it as kind of like a simplified Myers-Briggs for your online behavior. And what it does is it registers, as Joe said, the degree to which you are risk-seeking or risk-averse, and the degree to which you are tending to be rule-compliant or rule-breaking. And then it matches that to these two really important nature of your personality, which is, how transparent do you want to be when you break the rules? So do you prefer to hide and think you got away with something, wasn't that sneaky, isn't that fun, they didn't detect it? Or are you one of those, hey, this is a stupid policy, this is a stupid process, I know better than that, I'm just going to do what I think is right for the client, for the situation, for the process, for yourself? So that has to do with transparency. And then autonomy is the degree to which you prefer to make your own decisions and forge your own way. Entrepreneur, anybody? Angie, Joe, entrepreneurs. As opposed to perhaps those who prefer the structure and the routine of rules and rhythms and like to be told what to do, and they will check in and they will make sure that they are never taking a risk. So if you think about how that gives insight into how our users behave, especially now on AI-enabled systems, more important than ever is that we train them not only how to spot what's happening, but the hardest thing that we as humans seem to struggle with is that when somebody is hitting that point of vulnerability and kind of, reeling us in, and manipulating us psychologically, how do we get the user to turn to something that creates a pattern interrupt? Because all of the research we've done in the lab at the college and with our company, with real clients, suggests if we can get people to just stop, that is almost all you need for them to reconsider. But if they go down the slippery slope of the attack, they're often painfully aware that they are being manipulated, but too late into the process to avoid it. And then they feel very badly and they often try and hide it. So we know that human behavior is what it is. And so what's really fun for me is to take that intersection of cyber and AI, overlay personality, and figure out, well, how could we use AI to help defenders? And so what we've developed is a security coach that sits there all the time. It can sit on top of anybody's chatbot. It is style aligned using our patented technology, and users tend to trust it. And I don't know about the rest of you, whether you're talking about a business application or in our case, it's a vertical. The patent actually has ramifications for all kinds of things. If any of your listeners are using it for customer service, sales, for product information and stuff, people don't really like the experiences they're having. The one I loved the other day is that I opened an airline. I was traveling and I had to do some airline change. Of course, they defer you to online, right? Because it's cheaper and more effective. And what clearly was a chatbot, they must have thought we were all idiots. What was clearly a chatbot came on and said, "Oh man, I'm on my third cup of coffee. How can I help you this morning?" I went, "Oh my God." Now the airline shall remain anonymous because I sent the actual chief marketing officer a note that says, I do this for a living. And that is the dumbest thing I have ever encountered. I'm going to use it in my speech, and I'll be nice and not mention your brand. If you'd like to figure out how this really works, why don't you give me a call? Because this is not tuning up for personality. This is tuning up to lose trust. And I was amazed. Who falls for this?
Unfortunately, I think there are people there that do. To your point earlier, I think there are. In your particular case, you are, you are so close to it. And aware of it and educated about it and educating people about it, that of course it is offensive to you. But if you think about the typical consumer that's out there, that actually they may turn around and be like, "Oh, wow, that makes me feel good." I think that's kind of a challenge. As we continue to take a look at what we find in security risk analysis work, the number 3 or number 4 area that still comes into play as a deficiency is really documented, consistent, comprehensive security awareness training for employees. Absolutely. And if we do find those organizations that have a program in place, it is still that boxed stuff. It has nothing to do with risk profiling. It has nothing to do with what the end user should be aware of. And it's for me, it's a challenge to try to get people to get beyond the box. How do we get people to really say, if our employees are that first line of defense, how do we get those companies to really pay attention to what we're talking about today?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I'd like to just jump in super quick and say, some of the AI tools are so good that they will fool anyone. Yeah. And the my recent car purchase last July, that all happened because of a chatbot that was impersonating the guy at the dealership that I've worked with for 4 years now. I love him. He's awesome. And when I went to pick up my car and had negotiated everything back and forth, and I went to sign and pick up my car, down in Southern Maryland, I said to my guy, I said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to," I think it was Brandy was her name. I said, "I'd like to say hi to Brandy. She was so helpful on this deal." And he's like, "Brandy is our CRM chatbot." And I got angry because, number one, it was clear that they had scraped a ton of information from past interactions I had with him at the dealership. And I think also they probably scraped everything they could find online about me, because, this thing even joked with me and knew things about my family and being a business owner and tax credits and all this kind of stuff. And I really wish that the guy, the salesman would have just said, oh, you know what, she's on PTO today.
Right.
Because I was angry and I felt stupid. And I came back and I said to Joe, yes, we're going to embrace AI and we're going to use it to leverage productivity and we're going to do all kinds of cool stuff with it. But we are never, ever going to have it be the first thing on the front lines with our clients or our employees, where if they're interacting with AI, they're going to know they're interacting with AI, because that was just it took a really great experience and a day when I was super thrilled to drive my brand new car home, and it just made me livid.
James, the truth be known, she's really mad because the chatbot got her to pay too damn much money for the car to begin with. Let's tell the truth. Let's put it out there live on LinkedIn Live. She paid too damn much for the car. I get to do that as her big brother.
This tendency of us to want to humanize technologies, whether we're talking robots, human robots, whether we're talking chatbots, that's a really dangerous psychological shift, actually, Angie. And what you really felt was violated. What you felt was like, hold on a second. I thought I was dealing with a human. So you thought it was a human-to-human interaction that was intermediated by technology. And as we all know, Alan Turing, who I admire deeply, brilliant, mathematician and computer scientist, of course, from the post-World War II era. And he invented the Turing test, this idea that we would know we were in trouble. His forecast was this would not be a good event, by the way. He was quite dreading the idea in classic English fashion. I'm dreading the time when you can interact with a machine and not know it's a machine. And that's kind of the whole point of the Turing test. When we get to the point where the technology is so good that it can deceive a human, as it did with you, when the human discovers they've been deceived, this is never a good thing for a brand. So I like to warn my clients, there are subtle ways of making sure that you identify, first of all, that you're engaged with technology. And then the second thing is, don't overdo this. And I tell vendors, I think we're all going to get to the point where when we understand what collaboration with AI truly means, Angie, we won't be as fearful of this particular ruse that you fell prey to. But right now, it makes us feel like we've been tricked. And when humans feel tricked, they don't trust. So now you're going to be deeply suspicious. And there, the dealership lost the opportunity to build trust using AI properly and tried to actually trick you. And they succeeded. So, and they're hard. I mean, this was the same thing with the airline chatbot. It was really trying to convince me. I actually played a game. I said, well, how many cups of coffee you had and how much caffeine do you think was in it and how much of it has sped up your programming? And then it knew I'd found it. And then it was unhappy. I had detected its ruse. It was quite funny. And then they get kind of defensive and weird. So it is going to be an interesting journey for all of us. And I really hope our listeners are taking this in, because there are qualitative elements of the technology, Joe, back to your final point. Here's where AI can be super helpful. You can actually use scraping tools and chatbots and so on, set them up so that they're there to assist the human and in a nanosecond detect that they're potentially on the cusp of making a dangerous decision and help them and give them just-in-time training and information. That's kind of a good thing, right? Sounds good. But that's disclosing that the machine is able to do things that the human is too distracted to consistently do themselves. And that is a good collaboration between AI and the human, but it's known because it sits there. Our security chatbot says, I'm not human, but I'm here to help humans. That's its tagline. And that's what we tell people. It's here to work for you. It's here to help you. So you steer it, you do it. You still are the decision maker. And the human in the loop is going to remain an essential part. I talk about this in my book. It's going to remain an essential part of what we're all going to discover about this collaboration. And you're going to laugh, Angie, because you know me to be playful. We've actually trademarked the phrase AIQ, which is the merger of AI plus IQ. And our premise is that they need to be additive to one another. We need to catch the machine when the machine's not doing what it should do, and the machine needs to help us catch ourselves. And if you portray it that way, and you talk to people, that's what they want. They want the collaboration. What they don't want is a manipulation. That's different. And that's why you feel the way you feel.
Yeah. Well, and one of the questions I want to ask you, just to shift gears for a little bit, as a professor, especially teaching cybersecurity, I'm curious on your thoughts. I constantly get
I
asked
have
by
thoughts, you know better.
I constantly get asked by folks that find out that, I am an owner in a cybersecurity company. My kid's going to school for cybersecurity. What,
Cool.
Or should they go to school for cybersecurity? Or can I get an internship, or what's their first job? And, one of the very first things I want to say to them, no offense, is don't major in cybersecurity. Major in computer science, network engineering, programming, because in my opinion, it's like majoring in brain surgery. You don't major in brain surgery, you specialize later in your career, and then you pass boards after you have experience, but you go to medical school. So you have the foundation of the entire body and how it works. And I don't believe that you can work in cybersecurity until you've had that experience and understand how systems work to then apply that to securing systems. And then I feel bad, because how do people get entry-level experience unless people hire them? But I can tell you, in our business, many of the things that we normally would hire an entry-level person to do, we now are using tools that do that. And so there's a problem. I see it. I don't like it, but I'm also part of the problem. And as a business owner, that really has me kind of in a moral quandary. So I'm curious, I got to believe you get asked the same question. And on the teaching side of it, what are your thoughts?
So I want to agree with almost everything that you said, and just a couple of quick corrections. So I distinguish, and I'm hoping that we agree on this point. I don't know that there's actually a discipline called cybersecurity anymore. I think there's a difference between the technical elements of security architecture. So I think what we have to distinguish is the people who work deeply in the creation of and the securitization of technologies. And that is computer engineering, and that is the chops people get in creating and building security into products. And I think that is a unique discipline, and it really is engineering. Let's go to computer science, which is tanking, by the way, across the country. So a little place where we disagree is I would never want my kid to become a software engineer these days, because I think that's going to rapidly end as an option. The few humans that do it will be extraordinarily good, and they will use bots on a scale that is unbelievable. And I just think that the sort of mundane elements of coding that we used to teach students have become now teaching them how to steer an AI chatbot to create that same code in seconds that might have taken them minutes or hours. So I think that's an area that's probably really in a period of transformation. Then I want to come to what we teach, and I'm really always clear. I'm not a like you just said, I'm not actually a professor of cybersecurity. I'm somebody who has studied management. I have studied how organizations manage risk and process and people, and I bring those disciplines together, and I look at how we embed processes that improve the security posture of an organization. That is a managerial issue or a risk management issue. I love the language of your firm, because I think we all understand that there's a difference between having secure technology at the perimeter of the company. That's actually child's play to some extent, versus the people who cross the boundary from the outside to the inside, manipulating the insider as an example, or using extortion. So I think we have to be super clear. That's a managerial risk management problem that the business has to struggle with. And what I teach students is actually how to make organizations safer by communicating the essence of what we need to change about the behavior of the employees and the policies and the processes around the uses of technology, rather than securing the technology itself. So that would be how I would answer the question. And if I had a kid who said, I want to be in cybersecurity like you, I would say, well, pick your core discipline. Do you want to actually build the tech and secure the tech and think about the architecture of security? And you want to get into IAM and, firmware and, software and all that stuff. If you want to do that, ports, hey, that's where you go. If you want to learn how to make an organization safer, start in management. And there you pick up the technology chops. You add your technology chops on top of an understanding.
I love that approach.
Yeah, and that is the approach that we use at York Colleges. One of the reasons we're in the business school and not in the School of Computer Science. And
great. Yeah, I love that.
Well, it's unusual, and it's becoming a thing across the country to start to separate Really, cybersecurity is just what we used to call in the business information and privacy security before cyber became the sexy buzzword.
And now GRC, governance, risk, and compliance.
Right. Now that's a particular, so that's interesting for me. So as a trained attorney, that crosses into a boundary that's a little more complicated, because I think increasingly what we see is non-attorneys and non-lawyers and business people thrashing out who should be in charge of risk management, governance, GRC,
Right.
governance, risk, and compliance inside organizations. And I think the answer there is a balance. And ideally what you have is the same person. You have the person who's got the fundamental chops of understanding what a typical for-profit enterprise values as a business, with an overlay of either deep study in risk management or law. I almost don't care. But the ability to bring a professional body of knowledge overlaid onto that. So no matter where we're looking, Angie, I think you're right. There's a core concept here that's important. Want somebody to understand how organizations function, how they're governed, how they're built, how they put processes in place, how they assign. If you don't understand all that stuff, you can't take specialized knowledge and make it relevant.
Right.
So James, I'm going to be really selfish with our last 4 minutes, and I'm going to ask you to help me.
I'd love to.
So very often I have to sit with either boards of directors, senior leaders, business owners, etc. And I'm looking for, and maybe it's my own mindset that has to change, maybe it's the delivery of the content that has to change, but what is it that I should be sharing with them to get them to understand that the traditional security awareness training really needs to go by the wayside? And what do we need to be doing now this year moving forward to truly help their employees be more safe and secure?
I love the question. I get it all the time. Here's how I'm answering it today, and feel free to beg, borrow, steal, rob, whatever this
It's being recorded so I can get the transcript.
Good. So here's what I tell people. It's a little bit like training a kid how to cross the street instead of modeling the behavior of how to cross the street safely. And so I put to boards this point all the time. I say, since the attackers already have AI, do you have? And they say, oh, well, we're still exploring it, still thinking about it, it's risky. And I say, well, so is crossing the street, or so is playing a contact sport, or so is learning to drive. But, these are experiential, that they're not something that you can theoretically describe. So if I describe what employees should do in terms of making the right choices, I am not convinced they will until we model the behavior and allow them to experiment with how to make the choices for themselves. So I say to boards, it starts with, you should be immersing yourself today as a board member in what AI means for your business, both risk and reward, because it's got both, and that you should be thinking about not security awareness training, but about how to encourage humans to make risk-informed decisions at the point at which they are online and threatening your business. And if you can't model that as an experience, and you can't help them with tools that are going to assist them in decision-making, you've really missed the point. Training will not change behavior. Any psychologist will tell you. Training gives us awareness that we need to do something about our behavior, but it doesn't actually change our behavior. So I don't know whether that helps, Joe.
It does. It does. It really does.
A real delight to be here, to see you both. This has encouraged me to think about a trip up to Harrisburg where the three of us might locate ourselves in a bar somewhere. We'll give away our secrets, because I think it's time for us to gather for a glass of wine, one of my favorite activities.
We will make that happen.
I look forward to that.
We'll get on the calendar. James, thanks so much for being with us today. I appreciate it.
Great, folks. Awesome
Thanks,
conversation. Again, you can get my book online if you want it, Beyond the Code.
Beyond the Code.
Beyond the Code. Lovely conversation. Angie, Joe, appreciate you both.
Yep.
Take care.
I want a
Thank
signed
you.
inscribed copy.
Tell you what, I'll bring the books. You buy the wine.
You got
Fair
it.
enough.
Deal.
See you guys soon.
Bye, James.